A young man, James in his late 20s, arrives at his new apartment. It's a small, old building with creaky floors and dark hallways. James is excited about the fresh start, away from the noise of the city, hoping to find some peace. But something feels wrong. The apartment is too quiet, the kind of quiet that seems unnatural. He brushes it off and begins unpacking his things, setting up his furniture. The only noise is the soft hum of the fridge and the occasional creak from the walls. When he finishes, he sits on the couch and turns on the TV, but the eerie silence still hangs in the air. That night, as James lies in bed, he hears it. A faint scratching sound coming from behind the wall. It's irregular, almost like someone is gently tapping on the drywall. He sits up, straining to listen. The sound stops, then starts again, this time a little louder. James, probably just old pipes. But the sound continues, growing louder and more persistent. He stands up, heart racing. He walks to the wall, pressing his ear against it. Scratching becomes rhythmic, almost like it's coming from inside the wall itself. He shivers, but tells himself it's nothing. Old buildings make weird noises. The next day, James tries to push it out of his mind, but the scratching continues, always at night. Every time it happens, it's just a little bit louder, a little more frantic. One evening, he hears a soft thud from inside the wall, followed by a whisper. Voice, let me out. ... James freezes. He can't be hearing this. His mind races with possibilities, but all he can think of is that something, or someone, is trapped behind the wall. James can't ignore it any longer. He grabs a hammer and begins to tear at the wall. The sound of the hammer smashing into the drywall echoes through the apartment. As he removes a large section, the air becomes cold, and a thick, musty smell fills the room. Behind the wall, he sees something strange, an old wooden door that he's never noticed before, hidden within the wall. The door is small, barely large enough for a person to crawl through. There's a rusty lock on it, and the wood is scratched, as though someone had tried to break through it long ago. ... He feels a cold ... He feels a cold shiver run down his spine, but curiosity gets the better of him. He picks the lock and pushes the door open. Inside is a narrow, dust-filled room. The walls are covered in old, yellowed newspaper clippings, all centered around missing persons from the building's history. A lone wooden chair sits in the middle of the room, facing a cracked mirror. The mirror reflects the room, but there's something wrong with it. It's distorted, like the reflection is slightly out of sync with reality. Suddenly he hears it, a soft, dragging noise behind him. He spins around, but the room is empty. His heart pounds. He steps backward, but as his foot hits the floor, the mirror cracks and splinters, sending shards flying. In the chaos, a hand emerges from the mirror, its fingers long and bony, dragging itself out toward him. James stumbles backward, horrified, his breath quickening. James, no. He tries to run, but the door slams shut, trapping him inside. The mirror continues to distort, and the hand crawls out further, followed by a face. Twisted and gaunt, eyes wide open, locked on James with an expression of pure malice. The face smiles, revealing sharp yellow teeth. His voice, you shouldn't have opened it. ... The walls begin to close in on him, the space shrinking with every passing second. The reflection in the mirror moves faster than he does, mimicking his every motion. James scrambles to escape, but the door won't budge. Finally, the mirror pulls itself free of the wall, dragging the twisted figure out. It reaches for James, its fingers icy cold. In one final, desperate attempt to escape, James grabs the nearest object, a broken piece of the mirror, and stabs it toward the figure. But it's too late. The figure smiles one last time, then disappears into the darkness with James, leaving only an empty room behind. The insulation. The moving van had just left, and James was taking a quick look around his new apartment. It was an old building, so old that the elevator sounded like it was about to break down at any moment. He walked through the apartment, noticing how dark and gloomy it felt for some reason. Even though the sun was shining outside, inside it was like living in the shadow of a cloud. He shrugged it off. It was just an old building. He decided to go back to his room, but as he was walking down the dim-lit hallway, he heard a noise. It was a light scratching sound, like fingernails on wood. It grew louder for a moment, and then stopped. James paused, listening intently. Silence. Had he imagined it? Probably. Still, it was a weird sound to hear in what should have been an empty apartment building. Shaking off the unnerving feeling, James went into his room and shut the door. As soon as the door was closed, the scratching started again. This time, it seemed to be coming from behind the wall. James frowned, walking over to it and putting his ear against it. The scratching continued relentlessly, persistent and maddening. It wasn't coming from the pipes because he could hear water flowing through them now. It was definitely from behind the wall. What could it be? Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every time James closed his eyes, he could picture whatever was behind the wall. But as the night wore on, the scratching became a whispering voice, a raspy, dry whisper that seemed to seep into his bones. "Open me," it said. "Open the wall. Let me out." Who was it? What was behind there? Curiosity gnawed him. James got up, walked over to the wall, and put his hand on it. He could feel the vibrations of whatever was behind there. "Open me," the whisper urged, growing louder. James took a deep breath. What was he thinking? It was probably nothing but trouble. But the voice was getting louder and more insistent. He couldn't take it anymore. He needed to know what was behind the wall. He grabbed a hammer from his toolbox and started banging on the wall. Plaster fell from the ceiling and the sound of breaking wood echoed through the apartment. With each swing of the hammer, the voice grew louder until suddenly there was a large hole in the wall. Behind it, James saw darkness. The darkness reached out, eager to swallow him whole. He screamed and stumbled back. He took a few steps away from the hole and looked at it again. Was he really going to do this? What if it was nothing but trouble? Then the voice spoke again. "Open me. Please let me out." How could he refuse? He was already in too deep. Taking a deep breath, James stepped closer. The darkness seemed to welcome him, beckoning him with its cold embrace. He reached out and touched it. The moment his fingers brushed against the darkness, a jolt of energy surged through him. The darkness was a door, a portal to another realm, and it was opening. James hesitated for a moment, then pushed the door open. Behind it was a small, cramped room with 4 bare walls and a single window. In the middle of the room sat a dusty mirror propped against one wall. It was old and ornately framed, and the glass was cracked, distorting the reflection that stared back at him. The air in the room was stagnant and heavy, making it hard to breathe. James could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon him, watching his every move. He took a step back, feeling a sudden urge to flee. But something was keeping him rooted to the spot, something in the mirror. As he looked closer, he saw a distorted figure trapped within its depths. It was a man, or at least it had once been a man. Now he was nothing but a shadowy outline, like a bad ink blotch test. The figure reached out a hand, clawing at the glass, trying to break free. In the mirror, James could see his own face contorted in a silent scream. The figure in the mirror was trying to pull him in. It wanted him to join it in its prison. James tried to tear his gaze away, but it was as if he were glued to the mirror. The figure in the mirror seemed to sense his fear, and it smiled, if such a thing could be imagined. The smile widened, stretching impossibly until its face was a grotesque mask of insanity. Then it began to speak, its voice a raspy whisper that echoed in James's mind. "Let me out." It hissed. "Let me out and I will show you true power." The figure in the mirror writhed, its form writhing like a snake trying to break free of its bonds. The glass cracked and splintered, and the figure lunged at James, its hand reaching out to grab him. James screamed and stumbled back, knocking over a chair. The sound echoed in the small room, and the figure in the mirror paused, its head turning slowly to face the source of the noise. James took the opportunity to scramble away from the mirror, his heart pounding in his chest. As he looked back, he saw the figure rising from the mirror, its form solidifying, becoming more solid by the second. The room seemed to grow colder, and a gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the candle and plunging it into darkness. The figure loomed out of the shadows, its eyes glowing red in the darkness. It moved with an unnatural speed, closing the distance between them in a blink of an eye. James screamed and ran for the door, but the figure was faster. It reached out and grabbed his ankle, yanking him off his feet. James landed on the floor with a thud, and the figure loomed over him, its face twisted in a cruel smile. You cannot escape me, it hissed. I am beyond your understanding, beyond your pitiful human comprehension. I am the harbinger of chaos, the bringer of madness. James struggled to get away, but the figure's grip was like iron. Its eyes burned into his, and James could feel his sanity slipping away. The figure leaned closer, its breath hot on James's face. Join me, it whispered, and together we can bring destruction to all. With a final surge of strength, the figure dragged James towards the mirror. The glass shattered, releasing a wave of dark energy that engulfed them both. Hush, James screamed as he was pulled into the mirror, his last conscious thought a desperate plea for help that went unanswered. The apartment was silent again. The only sound was the faint scratching from behind the wall, like fingernails on wood. And as the night wore on, the scratching grew louder and more insistent, then suddenly stopped. The silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of James's ragged breathing. He looked around frantically, trying to find a way out, but it was no use. He was trapped. Then he saw it. The mirror. It was still standing, but now the glass was shattered, revealing a dark, gaping hole behind it. The hole was a portal to another realm, a place of darkness and madness, and from within it, something was watching him. The entity had taken its host. Now it turned its attention to the rest of the world.